I'm almost certain everyone here knows who you are, but just in case, would you do
Really?
a small
There are
introduction?
7.2 billion people in the world. There are tons of Instagram content providers and things of that
Yeah.
nature. So, hello to teachers. Okay.
What?
Hello to hello to Teacher Stewart's followers and to Sensei's English. My name is Teacher Will. I'm from America, born in Louisiana, lived most of my life in Jersey, then Chicago, then came to Saudi Arabia, where I'm currently a teacher of English. And I love English. What else? What else? What else? I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your live Instagram. And yeah, I think what's my philosophy of teaching? A lot of different things. I know you're going to ask me questions and stuff, but I would say a G triple P, have a goal, plan, pray, and produce. And what else? You got to have fun when you learn the language, and I think that English, at least my philosophy and my thoughts of teaching is it's one of the global languages. It isn't the only one.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you learn English along with any other language, it exposes you to a different culture, it exposes you to a different mindset. And so I was not a teacher in the beginning of my career. I came from the business world. And so I got into teaching because of the economic crisis years ago, and I
Mhm.
kind of found passion. So that's a little bit about me, and thank you again for inviting me.
No, great introduction. That's good. I need to work on my. I always do that every session. I need to work on mine. Mine is very severe, but nice job. I'd love to know though, what kind of student were you when you were younger?
Um, yeah, I would say that's a good question. No one's really asked me that before. So growing up in my family, I'm the eldest of three, so education to me was like really it was important, you know, it was, you know, and my family was A's or B's. C's were not acceptable. I was never satisfactory. At least that's what my mom and dad said. It was like, how dare you get a C and D? You're not satisfactory. I did get certain C's in the course of my, you know, educational level. I'm a double major in English and history, so I remember I got a D one time and I was very mad at myself. But I liked education. I thought that, you know, I learned from my dad. My dad said something to me really important one day. He was like, listen, you want to make people stupid? Put it in a book because most people don't read.
Mhm.
And so I always remembered that. So education was stressed in my house. Book smart and also street smart. So both
Yeah.
were stressed because, you know, I think it's important, at least for, you know, as I get older and stuff and wiser and try to say this to my kid, it's kind of like, listen, I think education is a worldly process. I am definitely a proponent. Proponent means something that is good for you. I believe in the aspect of higher education, or as if you're able to afford it. And nowadays, depending on where you live and what you do, that's kind of hard. I think if you have the resources to get a formal education or sheepskin, it becomes very important to do because it opens up certain doors. If I didn't have an undergrad degree and two grad degrees, then I certainly know that there were certain opportunities to me that would not be available because of that. With that being said, I also think it's important to, you know, life is a great teacher and what we say is street smarts. So I think in younger years I was more book smart than I was street smart, and then I got older and I had a cousin that was like, yo, boy, you better wise up. So I think overall, education is, for me at least, a combination of, you know, educational qualifications and then also life experience. Because there are a lot of people I know that don't have any education, formal education, and
Mhm.
they have way more wisdom than me or way more smartness than me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I understand that. And then, like you say, some people can be very studious, but not know the, like you say, life cannot be life smart necessarily because they go one direction, but more than the other. Yeah.
Common sense, exactly.
Mhm. So, with those, like you say, you're a fan of education. What sort of teacher ignited, uh, you to learn well? That's really bad English. What sort of teacher helped you the most, do you think?
You know, three teachers come to my mind. My gym teacher, Mr. Traskin, he was from Armenia, or he is from Armenia. I think he's still alive. Buff guy, smart, really good with his students. Mrs. Cohen was my French teacher. She had a passion for the language. She loved to teach. We were not allowed to translate in class. There was no English in class, and I think that kind of rubbed off on my philosophy in terms of when I became a teacher. Because sometimes people ask me, hey, why don't you do, you know, subtitles on your videos and stuff, and I need to make a video on why I don't do that. And the other one was my biology teacher, Ms. Gangloff. I thought that I was going to be a doctor when I was little, or when I was younger, particularly in high school. I thought I was going to be a doctor. But Miss Gangloff was a really cool teacher because she was, not only was she knowledgeable, she was smart, she was worldly, but she was hard, but she was fair. Like, she really cared about her students. But in the aspect, it was like, listen, I remember I was a junior, I think, in high school. And I remember saying to her that, or she said to us, she was like, listen, nobody owes you nothing. She's like, life is hard. So I'm hard, but I'm fair. And you need to understand the value of education. So I would say those three really just like taught me things.
Okay, so it wasn't just, for example, do you think that their style suited your learning style, the way that you would learn? Do you think their style of teaching helped you learn?
Yeah, I mean, particularly my French teacher, I mean, it was very communicative in nature. It was, can you hear me? Somebody's saying the mic is awful. Can you hear me? Or do I need to take the mic off?
There's just like a tap in.
I don't know. All right. Yeah, if it gets worse, then I'll just take it off. Yeah, I think all three of those teachers, I think the similarities, even though they had different styles, I think in a one way, they kind of empowered their students to be curious about learning and to be accountable about learning and to take responsibility. And then I think in terms of the aspect of Mrs. Cohen, I mean, you know, she was all about the conversation. I mean, she was like, yo, you in order to learn French and learn the language, you have to speak it, you have to use it, you have to learn it in context. You have to, it's got to be alive. And so, you know, it's funny now that I'm a teacher, I guess there's certain aspects that I take from all of them. Hey, UK Studio, how are you? Nice to see you. Send me a message, please. Sorry, teacher. But no, I think all of them had a certain sense of like, you know, they made learning fun. They made learning accountable. They used different techniques. And I think that, you know, I did have the opportunity to, you know, go back. And when I decided that I was going to enter the teaching world, I did decide to go and enter, you know, get my TESOL certification. And I do want to say for any teachers out there or potential teachers out there, I don't think that just because I'm a native teacher does not mean that I'm a good teacher. I think that's baloney. I think there are a lot of other things out there that makes and defines a good teacher. One of them is that if indeed two want to learn three. But I do think, you know, what makes a good teacher is, you know, for me at least when I think about it is, am I self-critical? Am I open to professional development? Do I have passion? Am I able to gauge my students? And so getting a TESOL certification was good for me because it taught me, and shout out to Mira Benjamin and Deborah if they're on the call, my directors, but it kind of taught me, you know, how to teach English as a second language. So
is anyone else having an issue here?
Are you there? Okay. I was like, where'd you go? Where'd you go? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, there's some delay.
Okay. No, I was just saying.
Back to normal.
Okay, got it. Hold on. Let me take my headset up. No, I just think the thing is that I think, you know, what makes a good teacher is like, you know, the combination between, educational experience, and then also practical life experience. Because again, there are teachers that I know that have no formal certifications or whatever, and hands over fists, they make me look like a terrible teacher.
Yeah, there's many factors that go. I think the education, I'm going to say, I think having the knowledge of the subject you teach is just an area of being a teacher. And I think sometimes some teachers take that for granted. They think as soon as they have all the knowledge, that makes them a perfect teacher. When there's many different skills each teacher has. For example, someone's just mentioned patience is one thing. And another thing is being able to judge your students' level regardless of what they say. And another one is to be able to speak or be able to teach the learner depending on how they need to be taught, like their style, which they prefer, and being adaptable to that situation. And someone with just the knowledge doesn't necessarily have all of those other skills as well. So it's kind of coming back to your first teacher.
You know what I learned? Yeah, Stuart, hold on, I'm going to put these back on. You know what I learned? I learned something. I said, when I first started this field of mine, I said to myself, I said, you know what? I wanted to, my own definition, there's the how, there's the what, and the how. There's the what of English, there's the target language, there's the modal verbs, verb tenses, phrasal verbs, diction, linguistics, all of that other stuff. That's what you do. That's the what of English. And then there was a how, your particular style, your particular method. And for me, what I've usually tried to challenge myself is I want to be the perfect blend of both. And that's a work in progress, you know what I mean? But with that being said, I always wanted the how. There are great teachers that I've met where there are people, let me say it like this. There are people that I've met that, whether it was English or history or whatever discipline it was, is that they knew the what, they knew their subject matter. But how they do it, they weren't engaging, they weren't inspiring, they didn't motivate their students. And then you had people that were how, they had great charisma or they had great style, but then when you asked them a question of what the subject matter was, is they didn't know what it was. So for me, I always wanted to kind of have that, and it's a work in progress, that balance for both of them. The what, to be knowledgeable in English, whatever, and all of the different facets and components about it, but also how and what I do it, and my manner that's distinct. And I like that. That's a challenge. I mean, recently, I think I said this on a live, I think yesterday I did a live with learners, and a lot of times people, view me or perceive me, and you can't control perception. Perception is sometimes a reality. But I recently did a video on how, when, why, understanding verb tenses. And, I think a lot of times people view me as oh, teacher, at least from what I hear, oh, Teacher Will, you're a motivator, you're an inspirer, things of that nature. And that's part of me. But I kind of did a video that was a little different for me, that was not about motivation, that was not about inspiration, but was kind of like teaching, because I wanted to show that other side of me.
Yeah, sure, I get you. And I can vouch for that, because when I did the live with you last time, I'd done lives with learners many times, but with a teacher, it's kind of intimidating, especially someone who's done it quite a few times. So you were very kind and motivated me to do more because of watching your style. Because you listened, and it was quite fun, the way you interacted with the learners as well. But on that note, there's one rule I noticed that you seem to have throughout, and we touched on it a little bit earlier. You have a rule to not speak in another language in the comments during your live sessions. I obviously know the reason why. Can you explain, if there's a first-time learner who goes into
okay, so this is kind of my philosophy. We're lucky enough that the beauty and value of social media is that we're able to connect with whoever reaches us. And if indeed English has if indeed the language, whether it's English or French, German, Arabic, whatever it is, there are 4 language skills: English, speaking, reading, listening, and writing. then I do think that oftentimes what happens is that people don't know how to write, or they don't like to write because they don't practice on your writing skills. So for me, number one, a live Instagram provides a person an opportunity to write in English, to practice their writing skills, number one. And more importantly, it's rude to write in another language that's not your own. I cannot assume that everyone is going to know French if I write in French or if I write in broken Arabic. Now, I know that might be that, hey, you know, there might be people at a lower level that might want to convey what they're thinking, and they don't necessarily have the means to do it because their writing skills are not there. But then some people do it because it's rude, and then other people have done it, at least in my experience, to say something disrespectful about somebody else and not think that no one else on the line knows what the language is. It's rude, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
And it does not, last point for me is, it does not lead into a sense of commonality. I mean, on my, you know, I've usually said on my pages, and sometimes my learners might get mad at me, I'm like, listen, save the drama for your mama. It's like, I don't care about your race, I don't care about your ethnicity, I don't care if you're married, single, widowed, divorced, separated, what's your religion, all that other stuff. Sometimes people bring mess into a live Instagram. Yep. Sometimes people bring their own perspective. And my thing is, I'm like, listen, we're all here to learn. At least I am. Just because I'm teacher Will does not mean that I don't learn. I do. I'm a teacher and a student. So I just think if you have people write in English, it builds a sense of commonality, and it helps people focus on their writing skills.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Obviously, I understood before. I was just thinking if any first-time learners who see it for the first time or hear it for the first time didn't understand why. It's good.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
Have a bit of information on it. So, and on that note, on writing, how important do you think writing will be in the future?
It's interesting. As someone who majored in English, real life story, when I went to college, I was remedial English. I mean, I had the basics, but it was just the basics. Most people took part in English 101. I had to take a remedial class, English 100. I had a teacher from Scotland. She rode horses. I thought it was one of the best classes I've ever had, for numerous reasons. Number one, I believe that everything has rules, like math has rules, English has rules, writing has rules. And so what I find really respectful about writing is that she taught me how to write. The I, the B, the C, an introduction, a body, and conclusion. She taught me how certain paragraphs, particularly as it relates to academic writing, certain paragraphs are defining, causing, compare and contrast, defining, providing other examples. So that taught me. How important do I think it will be in the future? Extremely important. Public service announcement for those individuals, and this is just my personal opinion for what it's worth. If you want to become a good speaker, a fluent speaker, learn how to write. Because when you learn how to write, I think overall it enhances your vocabulary, number one. And number two, if one knows how to write, particularly in the business world as it relates to contracts or executive summaries or emails or PowerPoint presentations, being an effective writer to be able to convey what is in your mind and or being able to convey what others' thoughts are is a skill that is extremely important. Most people don't know how to write. Hey, Omar, most people don't like writing, not because they maybe don't like it, but because they don't practice in it. So I love to write. It's kind of like there's a difference, and I don't write as, I used to write a lot of thoughts and keep a journal, not as much as I did. But I said this to my students one time when I was at the language school. I was like, it's very easy if you're speaking to someone to tell them oh, I don't like you, or oh, that's a great idea. But if you're able to convey your thoughts and persuade someone in a very convincing way, either positively or negative, oh, I love it. So learn how to write, people. I love to write. I remember when I was in, a friend of mine recently asked me to, help them with their essay, and I was in it. I was like, oh, say it like this or whatever. Because the language as a whole is metaphor. Words do not necessarily convey. the exact meaning what a person might have either emotionally or logically, but if indeed you can put it in such a way where that writing is compelling or persuasive, oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Okay, I've got 3 points I've taken from all of that. So first, I should have worded my question better. Do you think physical writing will be used in the future as much as now? Pen and paper.
No, it will not, but I think it will be a specialized skill. I'm old school. I'm old school.
1,000%.
I still, you know how old school I am? I'm probably older than you. I'm old school. Like, it's very hard for me, and I've recently over the years learned it. It's very hard for me just to get on a laptop and just start writing. I'm old school. I need a paper and this is a pen, but I use a pencil. So I do think that the handwriting, it will be around. It'll be a specialized skill. And people don't necessarily know how to write because also, I'm sorry, people don't necessarily know how to write as well because why? Because we have Grammarly, we have spell check. Like, I'm old school that way. I'm like, how do I spell this word? So yes, there are advantages to technology, but I do think that those that are like, you know, handwritten, it'll become a specialized skill.
Yeah, so in Japan we have something called calligraphy, which is a specialized painting of kanji or characters in Japanese. So I think cursive, for example, will be similar kind of concept. Yeah, so like a sign writing or something, it will be specialized to. But my next question is, you've touched on it again. So I find that my spelling has gone down because I rely on autocorrect way too much. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, you know what? I'm showing my age. And I'm glad to be 50. So here's my thing. Technology certainly has its pluses. I would agree with that. Technology is the wave of the future. It's not going anywhere. I do think what's important is, at least for myself and for my family, is to not be so reliant on it. I think about a year ago, I did like a month on my Instagram page. I did like the month of spelling, right? Because oftentimes people, to your very point, it's kind of like, well, you know, there's autocorrect. So if you're on the PC or you're on the laptop or you're on the phone, if something comes out, bam, it automatically corrects for itself.
Yeah.
How I learned to spell, there are different ways of spelling. Check it out on my Instagram page, phonetically, understanding prefixes and suffixes. So though I am a proponent of, I'm not showing my age, I'm 50. You know the secret? A couple things. Genetics. Thank you. Genetics, black don't crack, I'm not being racist, and lots of water. So it's genetics and the melanin and lots of water. But anyway, so no, I do think that, I think what becomes important is, at least in my own perspective and in terms of my family, is you know, balance. You know, there are prefixes and suffixes, you know, and the English language, the roots, even though we borrowed a lot of words, it comes from Latin, it comes from Greek, and if you have the foundation, people now don't have the foundations. I was old school. I had to write, I had note cards, so when learning how to spell, I had the word on one side, I flipped it on the other. My mother made me do this, right? So it was like, okay, word on one side, and then you had, you know, how many syllables. And then on the other side, it was like, what's the definition, and use the word in a sentence. So I am a proponent of technology, obviously. You know, it's not going anywhere. But I do think there's certain things that should not be left on the past. It's the same with mathematics. If you ask most people to add without a calculator, they're like, what? What's that? I can't do that. So...
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And then, so to move on slightly from that, nowadays we use a lot of anagrams in our messages to each other. So many people, instead of saying like a haha, as we may have written down, or text messages a long time ago, there's like LOL or something like this. And as we've seen, once words become very, very popular, they normally end up in the dictionary if they're used enough. even slang terms. So, do you think that anagrams will become an important feature within the language?
Teacher Stewart, could you repeat that? You're breaking up, sir.
Oh, really? Okay, 1 second.
Okay. Can you just say what you said again, sir? You were breaking up.
I'd love to. So, these days, many people use anagrams within their messages to one another. Do you think that this will become an important feature in the future, that a teacher may actually do a lot more focus on in comparison to now, where we try not to? It's kind of like, not taboo, but like kind of taboo for teachers to teach about, when I say anagrams, I'm on about like LOL or something similar to this. Do you think it will become very common?
Yeah, well, yes, even more so than it is now. So my perspective would be this. I think that one of the challenges and opportunities as it relates to any, whether it's a teacher or any English learner, and I think this applies to language as a whole, contrary to popular beliefs. I believe that language evolves. I believe that language changes. There are some languages and some cultures in society that think it doesn't. They have a right to that opinion. I would use the example by saying 100 years ago, the word Google was not utilized, right? Because it was not invented or created yet. What there's being said is, I think what you're highlighting is that the ability between writing or speaking will be in two ways. But more so even now. I mean, you have formal writing and formal speaking, the proper grammatical structures of English, right? Whether it's speaking or writing. And I do think, to your point, what will continue to evolve is that you will have increased usage of anagrams, abbreviations, and formal writing, informal writing will become more formal. That's why I think, learners, it's important that when you're learning the language, at least from my perspective, it is important to understand what I call formal speaking and slang English, because knowing what that is, and you could do a whole lesson on it if you're a teacher, and or if you were a learner, you could do like tons of anagrams or tons of abbreviation, LOL, BFF. So yeah, I think it will definitely increase. Why? Because technology, and there's a study on this, with increased technology and the advent means the dawning or the emergence, ladies and gentlemen, this is how we teach vocabulary. With the advent of social media, it has changed the nature of communication, i.e. look at WhatsApp, i.e. look at Twitter. I mean, if you ask most people, the younger generation, and perhaps if it applies to learners on the call, that's fine. If you would ask most people to write a grammatically correct sentence, no, they wouldn't, because they speak and write like what's up or what's on Twitter. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just understanding that, at least from my perspective, it's kind of like you have to understand the different audience and the different writing environments that you're in. If I am in a business environment, I cannot write the same way that I'm writing on WhatsApp or Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. 100%. People do, I especially like the comment where you said people, when they speak, that's literally what they write these days. They don't edit it at all, And for myself, like, I'm not very good at proofreading. So going back to autocorrect, I would just fire through and not double check what I've done. And with autocorrect, that's probably one of the worst things to do, because there's always an error along the way, So proofreading is definitely a skill I think learners should get used to practicing. I think that's a really important skill, just to continuously check to make sure you're doing the right thing.
I agree, and I hate that. I hate proofreading, to be honest.
Yeah, because like the anagrams, it's all about convenience, isn't it? We do it at speed for convenience for ourselves. So similar to proofreading is not convenient, but it's important. It's an important element that needs to be talked about a bit more, I think.
Definitely.
Do you think so? Some teachers completely taboo certain ways that people speak. Some teachers literally along the line, exactly as a book would say. But my personal opinion is native speakers, there's a higher percentage of native speakers that are not on the form of a textbook. You know, they're more slang orientated, and the way they speak is completely different. So do you think, what is proper English?
Teacher, I'm sorry, say that again, brother. You were breaking up.
Sure. What do you think is proper English? If the majority of people do not use a textbook form, do you
feel... Great question. I mean, I think that, at least from my perspective, what I try to do is, it's all language. All of that is language. And so I will answer the question this way. The teacher, him or her, will make the distinction in terms of the different forms of speaking. When we were talking earlier about, like, whether I want to formally speak from a textbook versus if I might hear something on the radio or a movie or a documentary. I think all of it's important, because oftentimes I think there has to be a distinction made. What do I mean by that? Well, if I'm only going to learn perfect textbook, like I open my book, right? And it says, today I am going to the mall to buy, hold on one second. Teacher Stewart. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay,
it fine.
got it.
Maybe
okay, got it. So no, I think all of...
There we go, we're back. Definitely back.
I think all of it's needed, because I think what is important is to expose the student to the various different types of learning. Because my thing is, if I'm only going to read or listen to, for example, if I'm only going to listen to podcasts that is academic in nature, that's fine, that's one resource. But I might be at a disadvantage, because if I'm hearing or watching a movie, that's not formal English. There's a lot of slang, there's a lot of vernacular. And so very few people speak formal English depending on your sentence or depending on your environment that you're in. Very few people speak formal, grammatically correct English.
Yeah, definitely so. And as someone mentioned that you shouldn't ignore formal English, that isn't what I meant. I just meant, like, it's an interest, for me, it's a super interesting topic, because so many teachers really are against mentioning bad English, obviously, but many native speakers do not use the correct grammatical functions because of convenience again, you know. So I think, like, we should teach both rather than just saying one is.
Exactly. I totally agree, because my thing is that as a teacher, the way that I teach, perfect example, the way that I teach live on a live or in my classroom is different from when I'm talking to my family or my friends. It's completely different. So therefore, language again is a conglomeration. Oh, I love that word. It's a conglomeration. It's a mixture. So I think it's important to teach both. And I think what's also important for learners is to be exposed to that. I mean, learners might have political or formal words are different from movies. Yes, exactly, OI. So I think it's, that's the beauty or challenge and opportunity of learning a language, French, English, Arabic, whatever it is to be exposed of all of the language. And as a learner, is to be open to not only the different forms of learning, but the different forms of teaching, while recognizing that I might have a particular preference of how I might want to be taught. But you can learn anything from anything. If I'm watching a comedy, for example, or a television series, I can learn from that just if I'm watching a presidential debate, because it's all part of the language. So I think it's a question of a person being able to expose himself, learn the foundation, get the foundation and the vocabulary and stuff, but then be willing to open and learn from there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, like, I'm similar. I think that the textbook's great for, like, the basic rules, although English doesn't always use them. But having the basic rules, and then be open to hearing other forms as much as possible, because even for simpler, most simplistic way I can put it is like gonna, wanna, you know, they're not the particular like structures that are meant to be, but it's probably the most used phrases.
And they're used.
Yeah.
Exactly, and they're used. So, I mean, I think, you know, teacher, you made a valid point, not only in terms of language, and I just very quickly, and accents, people, being open to different accents. I'm just saying, people, Teacher Stewart and I are both natives, right? But, wow, if you're, you know, if you're open to different accents, it will help, it will definitely improve your learning skills. I mean, I remember I had a very good friend in college, he was Scottish. His native language was English. His accent was different, as was mine. So it improved my it improved my listening skills. So I think that, again, it's that mentality of being open to all accents. So if you have problems with people's accent, well, wait a minute, are they fluent? Can they be understood? And that does not negate the fact that you might want to sound more like a native, which is fine, but there's no prerequisite about that. But I'll leave that alone because I'm your guest.
Yeah, no. Accent's super interesting for me. You know, England in itself is one of the smallest countries really in the world, and then there's it's just a mess of different accents. You know, and Scottish is just another kettle of fish in itself. Yeah, many learners. You're right, Ali. Many learners have this issue. They're scared of I think that causes a problem for the learner when they don't practice accents. Don't practice hearing the way the language is used naturally. It does create a problem, doesn't it? And then that leads to a lack of confidence.
I agree. Good point. Or, teacher, very quickly, or, okay, I'm your guest. I have to be nice.
Crack on.
No, I'm your guest. I have to be nice. Or when people, again, I'll say it like this. There is, you know, in the United States of America, we have over 30 different accents, right? At least. I have no problem with preference. I think that people need to be mindful of why they have a particular preference. I don't necessarily know if most people have thought about that, number one. And number two is, again, if you want to sound like a native, fine. The issue that I personally have is that when one discriminates or treats someone different because they don't have a native, really, who are you? Case in point, if we're talking about the difference between formal English and informal English, oftentimes it has been my experience that those non-native English speakers grammatically are much more grammatically correct than a native. Why? Because, at least in my experience, I know grammar, but I know it naturally, I know it intuitively. So again, I think what's important is, again, what I at least try to help people think about. They don't have to agree or disagree. You know, that's the beauty of life. With that being said, wow, English is a global international language. Over 1 billion people study the language. There are more non-native individuals that speak English than native individuals, and yet there's a perception out there like, oh, I want to sound like a native. I want to sound like a native. Oh, okay. You might want to ask yourself that. For me, I would rather care about someone that is fluent, that is confident in the language, that has proper intonation and pronunciation. With that being said, I get it. Like, I'm not dumb. I can be crazy sometimes. Like, I get it. There's a whole industry out there. Oh, sound like a native. Focus on your accent. Have the American accent. Have the British accent. Okay, that's fine. But if I don't want to have that, and I'm fluent, it's fine.
Yeah, definitely. What's your opinion on become fluent in 3 months?
Bullshit. Excuse my English.
I love that answer. Thank you. I appreciate that. Game over.
Sorry. See, I should. I'm sorry. I use profanity. Okay, let me be honest. Really? Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Really? So my native language is French. And I became fluent in French in 3 months. Okay. There is a difference between fluency, which I believe is a lifelong process, and proficiency. So if you, For those of you, if it applies, that, if you believe that you can be fluent in 3 months, 3 weeks, 1 month, you have the choice of, ladies and gentlemen, of paying that particular tutor or English school that. That's a selling point. That's a bunch of baloney.
I think,
and if you subscribe to that's fine.
Yeah, I think like my problem with it is just to say that a course does it is a big issue, because a course is a limited amount of time. If a person decides to move to another country and is willing to put the effort in, like a real effort, I think you can do anything in like a short amount of time if the full effort's there, if like you're continuously talking, you're getting used to, and if we're talking about fluency, it's like the speed of your speech. Are you able to understand what they're saying, respond in a relatively speedy fashion with not too many pauses, etc. If you are getting the whole comprehension, and after like 5 to 6 months, because you're using it all the time and you're putting in the effort, that I can get. But for a course to say 3 months is a bit of an issue for me, because a course is probably one night, 1 hour once a week or something like that, and it's just, for me, it's just so dishonorable, to see people trying to sell something like that. I don't know.
Again, I can only speak for myself. So I think what you're highlighting is, again, learners, there's a difference between fluency, which I believe is a lifelong process, and proficiency. And proficiency will range on each different language skill. I do think that, how do I say this? Yes. What happens is that I'm going to take myself as someone who knows a foreign language. Well, you know what? There was no pill or no drink that I could take to be proficient or fluent in French. I had to work at it. I had to practice in class, out of class. I had to speak. I had to write. I had to be immersed in it. So I do think for some individuals, if you want to, let me say it like this. That's why I guess people think I'm crazy. If you want a quick fix in English, I don't think anything is possible. But no, they're lying to you. They're lying to you. And so I'm not going to get mad at somebody if you spend your money and your resources thinking that you can get it. Like, learn English in 30 minutes. Okay, you can, but there's a difference between saying learning English in 30 minutes and learn to be fluent in 30 minutes. Okay, relate things back to your target language.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to.
Or native language. I'm sorry, native language, not target language.
I don't want to kill up too much of your time, because we should have finished by now if I was on time. So I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. I can go another 20 minutes if you have it. Other than that, I got to go.
Okay, cool. So we'll do to the end of whenever this switches off. I think it'll be 10 minutes or something.
Got it.
Anyway,
okay.
So on that note, do you think fluency is now a buzzword?
Wow. What do you mean by that, teacher? I like that. What do you mean by that? Explain.
So I used to work a lot in hotels and did a lot of sign writing and that kind of matter. And then you take an adjective and you're using it. That's popular at the minute that people are using. You use it to overemphasize something. But obviously this isn't in terms of an adjective, but I think fluency is like a word that people throw around too easily, and I think now marketers use the word fluency to sell something rather than using it as what it should be.
Okay, great point. Hey, Ghost Brother, how are you? So I would say it like this. The educational industry, ESL industry, teaching English to a foreigner has always been a business. I think that people sometimes fail to realize that. And with the creation and advent of social media, I do think that there are words that are buzzwords and sell words that from a seller's perspective, it's the buzzword, so people will relate to the market. It's not right or wrong. I'm just saying what the conditions are. So yes, I think it's sometimes overused, number one. Number two, I don't think that there is a distinction between the aforementioned as it relates to fluency proficiency. And number three, I think that there is accountability for me if I'm a learner to ask myself what that means. With the creation and advent of social media, which I think has been a very good thing because it is one tool, not the only tool that will help someone learn English. Social media has made, to a certain degree, people lazy, reliant, and entitled. And so as a result, they hear these words, become fluent in 3 months, learn a language in 4 months without necessarily going as deep as they could. So as though I think that there are advantages, particularly to social media, I do think there are disadvantages that people sometimes don't want to talk about, or they just do talk about it, or they either ignore it. So yeah, I think that they do. I mean, I think it's a selling point from both the buyer and the seller's perspective. Fluency is lifelong. I mean, I don't know, language, English grows, it changes. I think they said at least 4,000 words. I think I did a game night on it, but like at least, let's say 2,000 words are added to the English language every year. I think that's applicable to other languages, but they can make the argument against that. So yeah, I mean, it's a buzzword. Fluency. Okay, it's lifelong. Learning. I just related to this. Every day I have the ability and the blessing to wake up, I learn something, right? So I will hope that I would learn something new in English. Proficiency, I can have a depth, I can have an understanding and a context and situation as it relates to writing or speaking. But fluency is a lifelong process. We're both natives. I mean, there are 1 million words in the English language. How many words do I readily have accessible between my active brain and between active knowledge and passive knowledge? I probably use anywhere from like 1,000 to a maximum of 2,000 words.
Yeah.
And so, no, it's a buzzword. And I do think that people, have an opportunity to just think about what education means, why they're learning English, what's the reason, and more importantly, are they willing to work at it?
Yeah, definitely.
What are they willing to do?
Yeah, exactly.
In this great age of the 21st century, if we follow the Gregorian calendar. I mean, I find it intellectually interesting. Again, I don't mean to be rude, learners, extended family. I just want you to think of something. I find it very interesting that we say, or I've heard people say, oh, I can't speak English with anybody. There's nobody to speak English with where I live. Well, wow. If you're connected, if you have an internet connection, I think there's somebody in the world that you can speak English with. Maybe not in your country.
This is interesting. So do you think that native speakers are the equivalent of a top sports star in a sport?
You mean in the educational field?
I mean, like, they're seen as something like godly, to learners. So, like you.
Okay, I will expand that and give you my perspective.
Please.
Okay, so this is just me, teachers. This is me, learners and extended family. My name is Ask Teacher Will. Okay. And I'm a human being first that happens to be a teacher. I am not God. I am not famous. I happen to be born in the right country at the right time. So yes, I think there is overall a fascination and servitude, or teachers are held in higher esteem, quote unquote, godlike, highly respectful, particularly native teachers. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, just because I'm a native English speaker does not make me a good teacher. So there are, if it applies, there are students that are learners that think like, oh my God, he's a native. I only want to speak to a native. I don't want to learn English from anybody else. I only want to learn from a native. Well, or better yet, I've said this one a lot. I only want to speak to a native. Well, with all due respect, that's fine. That's your choice. That's your preference. But did you think about what you just said? Because somebody said that to me one time on a live. I only want to speak to a native. So I just respectfully asked the question, okay, well, why am I speaking to you? Because you're not native. For those individuals that limit themselves, right? Again, preference. I don't have a problem with preference. You might want to ask yourself why you have that preference, but that's not an English call, right? But I find it interesting. There are 450 million native English speakers in the world. So 450 million versus a billion. Which number's bigger? And then some of you complain about, I have nobody to speak with. Well, wait a minute. And then you only want to speak with a native. Okay, so then maybe you're missing the opportunity to speak with another person that learns English and speaking English. Really? Now call me dumb, which I can be, or call me crazy, which I can be, if it applies. I think it's necessary to use its brain. So again, I think it's an in-depth thing, because I think that the industry perpetrates that. And I think that there are some native teachers that perpetuate that. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just making that at least something that I'm aware of and something that I do. I don't want to say never zero. That's an adverb. Very rarely do I sit back and be like, oh, I'm a native English teacher, I'm better. What I will say, and you've been on my call, I'm like, hey, my name is Teacher Will, I'm from America, I'm a native English speaker, but that does not mean you can't learn it. But no, the industry perpetuates that, and there are teachers that perpetuate that. Why? Not right, not wrong, but let's keep it wrong. That's a selling point. There are countries that I know that will only take a native teacher, and you have to have, not all countries, and in some countries, you have to be a certain gender and a certain race. Why is that? People don't think about that. Not right, not wrong. It's just what it is.
Yeah. But this question kind of is bringing it full circle, because someone the other day sent me a message saying that they want to speak to people. And I said, well, here's a link to this teacher. She's Hungarian, but she's a very good English teacher. She wants people to share, contact each other, so they've got language partners. And they said, no, I want to speak to a native. I didn't say, I wish I was honest enough to say, why would a native speaker want to speak to you? For learning, because that's basically what it is, isn't it? If you're not paying for it, why would a native speaker want to help you for no gain?
I will leave that alone. Well, I do. Teacher, you're going to get me in trouble. No, you're not. I'm going to speak my truth. I do think that there are times that people, recently, I said on a live Instagram, and I said it today, I try to be grateful and appreciate for a lot of things that I have. And I do think that, again, number one, people don't necessarily people don't have to think the way I do. That's fine. That makes the world go round. But I don't think sometimes people hear what they say. Number one. And you make a valid point. If someone's not a teacher and if they happen to be a native, why would they want to speak with you? They might want to speak with you just to be nice or if you're friends, but I'm like, you're not teaching. People cut themselves off. I have usually said this on a live Instagram. Present perfect people catch it. I have usually said this. If there are opportunities for you to learn the language and you cut yourself off because you only think that the native is the only person that you can learn from, that has not been my experience. You're missing an opportunity. You could be possibly missing your blessing.
And also, on that point, like we said earlier, and like I suggested, I think there's a high percentage of people that don't speak the textbook English who are native speakers. So I feel when someone says they only want to speak to a native speaker, I literally want to say, do you? And why not speak to someone who's not native, because they're actually in the same process as you, they're using potentially the same materials, they know all the same structures. There may be a difference in level, but like you say, there's millions of people who are wanting to, for some reason, they want to learn our language. We're very lucky. And they're, like you said, they're missing out on a lot of opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I think without going too, deep, because one of my older learners said, oh, Teacher Will, you're so deep. I don't necessarily know if I'm deep. I just do think that it's important to, at least what I've asked in my own life is, I'm like, why do I want what I want? I'm just saying in terms of relating to English. Why do I want a native speaker? What's the point? What's the value? And again, I think, again, you know, people have choice and preference. You know, there's certain things, it is true, ladies and gentlemen, there's certain things that you can learn from a native perhaps that you can't learn from a non-native. Like if it's like the cultural, the innuendos about a particular culture, that is valid. That's fine. But to negate someone because they're not a native, I just don't think in my own sense that is, you know, that's just not right to me. I understand why it's done. But then what I try to do is at least flip it on the person. I'm like, well, again, why should I talk to you? You only want to talk to a native.
Yo, let's try and finish this off properly. Thank you very much for rejoining. Canoe, yes, fantastic. So I will do that. Fantastic news. We're back on it. Here we go.
Hello? Oh, the hour is done.
Let's finish this up properly.
I said something really bad and Instagram got rid of me. So
that's what it is for sure. That is definitely what it is. But yeah, I think like the general point that we're both trying to make is there's many opportunities for people out there, and why not take it? I think actually native speaker is an excuse. I only want to speak to a native speaker, you know, in some circumstances, because, you know, someone that's like putting it off, you know, the same as me, I'll only use this textbook or something along those lines, you know. Can be used as an excuse to not do.
That's a really good point. You know what, teacher? Thank you, because you made me think. That's a really good point. So if I will tell you this, because I believe in we learn together and stuff. So I'm going to say it like this. I think you inspired me. So if I use it on a story or a video, I'll give you props. No, I mean, I think as a whole, you know, let me make an I statement. I will use myself. I think if there's opportunities for me to accomplish something, particularly in the world of social media and technology, I often, in my life, I have been known to make excuses for myself in terms of learning something or doing something. Now, if that applies to other people, as it relates to your English, that's on you. That has nothing to do with me. I'm just talking about myself. I do think that you make a valid point, though, that sometimes people make excuses and they don't want to be accountable for their own learning, and they will, oh, well, no, I can't learn English because I only can learn from a Brit, a Scot, a Canadian, a South African, an American, a Brit. Okay, cool. And if you do, by the way, last point in this native stuff. Oh, by the way, if you do want to learn from a native, then you know what? That might cost you more, and you might have to pay for it. They have applications for that, and there are teachers for that, and that will probably be a specialized skill. So you might have to pay. And if you don't pay, you don't have to pay. But then if people decide to do content like teacher here on his Instagram page, you know what? He's doing it because he wants to do it, then you might want to support it. I don't think people, my last point is this. I think that people, 2 points. Number one, take the opportunities to make them, if they want to learn the language, there are opportunities available. And then number two is to have a sense of gratitude and be appreciative for things that are available. A lot of times, there are a percentage of people that take things for granted and think that social media and Instagram and YouTube and all these applications are going to be around for a while, or that people think, the learners or extended family think that, that a live Instagram is just a common framework. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, no, it's not. So be grateful. Let me make an I statement. I am grateful and I'm appreciative for things that I have to pay for or for things that are not. I try not to use it and abuse it. And people need to wake up, because if they think as though that YouTube or Instagram or all of these other free services will continue to be free, or that people or content providers, whoever they are, will continue to be of value and service and do stuff, which is their choice to do, wake up, people. Because no, it's not. No, it is not. I said that in the beginning of the year, Teacher Stewart. I said, okay, people, look, because there I remember a time. And again, people can do what they want, but I know now I've been on this thing for like 2 years or 3 years, whatever like that. Yo, people appreciate stuff. Some of y'all, some teachers don't do live ins. I'm only talking about in the English world, and it's their right to do it. Not or not. I'm just talking about myself. No, some people, there are people that I know that did live Instagrams and stopped doing it, which is their choice. Why? Because they were not valued. They were not appreciated. They were talked about. They were, if they were women, they were sexually abused. So for me, I continue to do it because I choose to, but let's appreciate more. I'm not, that's where I came with this word entitled. Entitled? I have, Teacher Will, you have a sense of entitlement? You owe me? I don't owe you nothing. I might be too honest, learners. I'm sorry, Teacher Stewart. I'll shut up.
No, not at all. Please. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to finish off with, would you like to promote anything of yours on here?
No, what I would like to do is say the following. First of all, in terms of promotion, I think, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your live. I know I had you on my live, and I like that because I don't get invited to many lives, so it's always a pleasure to be invited as a live. So,
why? Because it's
number
so fun.
one.
I mean, you like you say, you've got you're too conservative, maybe, yeah?
I am. I'm too conservative.
I can imagine if just me and you were having a conversation, it'd be quite interesting. Well, yeah.
No, again, I appreciate that. I do believe that the only thing that I would promote is I would promote just in terms of learners. Listen, at least my learners. If you have not looked at Mr. Sensei's English, check him out. The information might be valuable. And if it is valuable, then walk the walk and talk the talk and govern yourselves accordingly. That's the first promotion. And the second promotion that I would have is that learners understand why you are learning English and understand that for you, you have an opportunity to understand that if you think about a marathon, then, it's a long race. So it's not a sprint, it's a long race. Be kind to yourself, be willing to learn, and be willing to make mistakes, have fun. And the last thing that I would promote is a concept that is really important to me is that, sharing is caring and we learn together. So take opportunities to learn, get out of your comfort zone and recognize and realize that there are teachers and there are mentors that are there to help you. But ultimately, if you want to learn the language, you have to promote yourself. You have to be accountable for yourself. So that's all the things I got for promotion, sir. That's it.
No, that's lovely. That's a nice way to end. It's exactly what I assumed you would do, to be honest, which is good. I like that kind of feedback. I like that kind of that's good to tell, because not many teachers are willing to put that kind of information out as well. I think they sometimes feel that maybe when you speak to a learner as a person, it doesn't come across the right way sometimes, and they're worried about the way.
Oh, yeah. I think
being real, being honest and telling people that you think is important, especially as a teacher. So thank you for that.
I don't. Well, thank you. I don't know. I don't know. I think sometimes that gets me. Let me say it like this. I think the thing is that we are all teachers, and so I think the thing is I just try to be authentic, and I don't necessarily know if people like honesty or honesty to a certain degree. But at the end of the day, listen, I have to be me, and I think it's important. I don't typically like to talk about myself. You know that we had a side conversation about that, but I think it's important. It's just like, it's kind of like, this is a privilege. This is an honor. So I don't, it is what it is. So I appreciate that.
Okay, great. No, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There's quite a few.
Thank you.
Which is great. And
thank you, learners. Thank you for joining. And check out Sensei because he's got some good stuff. Check it out. Teacher Stewart, I'll talk to you soon. All right.
2 lives today, so please check both of those out.
Oh, good. All right. Good luck. Bye.